I want to talk first about the look of the movie because it looks different to me than most animated features that I see. It has more of a cartoony, 2D, traditional animation feel, even though it's CG. Let's talk about that and using that the techniques you did to adapt what people knew of Captain Underpants and to make it into a film. Where do we begin?
Sure. Obviously, we had the benefit of 12 books that Dave Pilkey has created over the past 20 years. And Dave is not just a writer, he's an illustrator, and his illustrations are really quite cartoony to begin with. Dave was very influenced by Charles Schultz and the Peanuts stuff, and I think, as was I actually, I think when we first met, we both bonded over the fact that we taught ourselves to draw by copying Peanuts cartoons. So there was kind of a given to me, at least, that this would be a cartoon, and a cartoon in the most pure sense, and we don't get to see that often in animated features these days. There tends to be a movement towards realism and naturalism, and it was actually really fun to run fast the other direction back to the stuff that I came up with and was inspired by growing up.
Visually, you do things in the movie with different media. You say mixed media. There's 2D animation. There's I call it collage animation, stop motion, and then there's some puppets and things. Can you tell us a little bit about the idea of using those things? And
yeah, well, again, in the books, one of the things to me that make them special and probably why they've been so beloved and encourage so many kids to read is there's all these unconventional tricks and techniques that Dave Pilkey does, and some of them work well in a literary form and don't really translate to cinema. He has comic books within the books. He has fliporamas, which are a staple of every book, where an action scene is about to break out, and then he'll suddenly go to a very rudimentary flip book way of handling it. So that was something from day one when I came on the movie. I thought, all right, well, that's what's going to make this movie unique, are trying to find all these cinematic techniques that we can do to keep this unpredictable and keep this in the mind of these two very imaginative best friends. So the first sequence that we boarded when I came on the movie was what ended up becoming the sock puppet sequence in the movie. It was written as this kind of nightmarish vision of the future of them after they've been separated and put in different classes, and how their friendship's never going to survive and it's going to dissolve over time. And it wasn't anything other than CG in the script. And I thought, all right, well, let's think about where we are in the space. And, these boys are in their tree house. The weather's probably terrible outside. And maybe they've taken their socks off because they're wet. And maybe Harold holds one up and then suddenly we're in a sock puppet sequence. And the board artist, Todd Kurosawa, I remember looking at me. He had a big, excited smile on his face. And he's like, "Can we do that?" Yeah. And I said, "We can do it until somebody tells us no, and then let's try it out." So we did it, and I've had this experience a few times where you think you're out on a limb, and the studio's never going to go for it. And of course, after our first screening, it was probably the thing everybody loved the most, and that really opened the door for all these other things like the collage beats, and we knew we were going to have these kind of hand-drawn comics to make them feel like they were created by George and Harold, and those being 2D. And it just, really felt like the more of those we could have embedded in the story all the way through, so it didn't just feel like it was a one-off here or there, but like really a stylistic choice and a creative choice that made it feel like we were in George and Harold's point of view.
you also designed the environments.
Yeah. So as a production designer, sort of responsible for overseeing the look of all of that stuff, characters and environments. And, everybody that we brought onto the film, character design with Rune, Viz Dev with Chris Zebach and Perry Maple and Florian and the rest of the team that we had, everybody kind of, we pretty much gave them the books first and we're like, study, get the style, start looking at the style, and then just let go. Like just draw as free and as silly as Pilkey does, and let's get that up onto screen. And we found that when we were doing that, like our design choices weren't, oh, we need a specific television set from 1985 for this or whatever. It was like, draw a silly TV. What does a TV look like that's silly? Or,
what's a kid's version of what a computer looks like, not an actual computer.
Yeah, and so those types of things, that's sort of the way that Pilkey draws in the books. So we wanted to make sure we took that inspiration, and David was just, so supportive of all of those choices that we wanted to make and encouraged us. And so we felt like, well, we can really just kind of sit back and have fun and be silly with our designs in these.
Right. The voices, of course, we have to mention that. Was there a lot of improv on the set? Tell us about working with the actors.
We just lucked out. I mean, this was a murder's row of comedy greats. And the interesting thing was, because we had those guys in from so early, and they're all such great comedians, but they're also terrific writers. I realized quickly in the first couple sessions I had with them that I would be a fool not to take advantage of those skills they had. And I was in the booth with them. I like to be in the booth with the actors. And we'll read with them and try to just paint a picture of what the scene needs to do, and then really let them go to town. But they really brought an unprecedented amount of improvisations and ad-libs and helped not just find the voices of their characters, but really develop their characters. We brought them in to early screenings when the movie really wasn't fully working yet. Those kind of screenings you usually want to keep an actor away from because you don't want them to leave the project. But they came in, and we really kind of embraced them as creative partners on the movie, and they gave great notes, they great suggestions. Every recording they would, ask well, what's changed? What are we doing? How, and I would talk them through all that. So they were so invested in this and in their characters, and hopefully that comes through.